Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. John, who is the woman in this picture? The question landed on our sterile kitchen island with the force of a gavel. It wasn't shouted. Harriet never shouted. Her voice, honed by years in courtrooms, could strip a man bare with little more than a whisper. It was a scalpel, precise and cold, and at that moment, it was dissecting me. I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been pretending to scour job listings for the 100th consecutive day. My life had become a series of pretenses, pretending to be productive, pretending to be happy, pretending, most of all, to be the man everyone, including myself, thought I should be. For the past 6 months, since the layoff, I had been a ghost in our own home, a hollowed-out version of a husband. While Harriet's career soared, she was the provider, the rock, the one whose briefcase clicking shut in the evening was the starting pistol for our strained, quiet nights. I just existed, a piece of furniture she had to navigate around. The manila envelope lay on the quartz countertop between us. Spilled from it were several glossy 4x6 photographs, fanned out like a losing hand of poker. And there I was, in every single one, sitting across a small table at a downtown coffee shop, my hands wrapped around a mug, leaning in, listening. Across from me sat Monica, her expression etched with a familiar sorrow. My face, in those photos, was alive in a way Harriet hadn't seen in years. It was engaged, empathetic, present. My mouth went dry. My first instinct, the one buried deep in the male psyche, was to deny, to deflect, but the pictures were irrefutable. "It's not what you think, Harriet," I stammered, my voice sounding weak and thin in the cavernous kitchen. "That's Monica. Her husband just left her. She's going through a divorce. I was just being a friend. Listening, I swear. I'm not having an affair." Harriet didn't even glance at me. Her eyes, the color of stormy gray seas, were fixed on the images. She picked one up, her manicured nail tapping lightly on the frozen image of my face. "I know you're not having an affair, John," she said, her voice dangerously calm. The hurt in her eyes was so much worse than anger would have been. Anger I could fight. This weary, profound disappointment felt like a verdict I couldn't appeal. Affairs are about passion, about secrets kept for someone else. You're not keeping a secret for her. She finally looked at me. You're keeping a secret from yourself and from me. She slid another document across the island. It was thick, creamy cardstock, embossed with an elegant serif font logo, the Transitions Institute. My blood ran cold. I'd seen ads for places like this online. In the dark corners of the internet I visited, when the house became too quiet and the emptiness inside me became too loud, they were for people with problems, deep problems. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. "It's a behavioral therapy program," she said, her tone all business now. The wounded wife replaced by the formidable lawyer. 6 months, inpatient. It specializes in cases of... She paused, consulting the brochure as if reading a case file. Identity dissatisfaction, marital crisis, and intimate behavioral misalignment. The clinical sterile words hung in the air, a diagnosis for a disease I hadn't even known how to name. "You think I need..." That my voice cracked. "I think you're drowning, John," she said, and for the first time, a fissure appeared in her composure. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "You've been disappearing for years, right in front of me. This thing with Monica, it isn't the problem. It's a symptom. You're looking for something, hiding something, and whatever it is, it's hollowing out our marriage. It's hollowing out you." She took a deep breath, her shoulders squaring. The lawyer was back. "So you have a choice. You can pack a bag and go to this program, or you can pack a bag and leave. But you can't stay here like this. Not anymore. I can't live with a ghost." The ultimatum was brutal, but I couldn't deny the truth in her words. I was a ghost. For years, I had felt like I was wearing a costume, playing the role of a grown man, a husband, an executive. The suit never fit right. The lines felt rehearsed. The emptiness inside was a chasm, a constant, low-grade ache of not quite rightness. I looked at the photos again, at the man listening so intently to a woman's pain, and I realized, with a sickening jolt, that I hadn't been drawn to Monica out of desire, but out of a desperate, unspoken envy. She was allowed to fall apart, to be vulnerable, to express the sorrow I kept locked away. My hand trembled as I reached for the application papers Harriet had so clinically laid out. A pen was already there, waiting. I was being cornered, forced into a decision that felt both like a punishment and a strange, terrifying lifeline deep down, in a place I rarely dared to look. I knew she was right. I wasn't okay. With a shaky hand, I signed my name on the dotted line. John Miller. It looked like the name of a stranger. I had no idea that in signing away 6 months of my life, I was taking the first step toward finally undoing that signature and the entire identity it represented, forever. The click of the pen felt like a cell door locking shut behind me. But as I looked into my wife's heartbroken eyes, I couldn't escape the horrifying, thrilling thought that maybe, just maybe, it was also setting me free. The Transitions Institute didn't look like a hospital or a clinic. It was nestled in a quiet, wooded area, a sprawling modern building of glass and warm cedar that resembled a luxury spa. The illusion shattered the moment I stepped inside. A polite but firm administrator named Mr. Evans met me at the door. "Mr. Miller, welcome. We'll be taking your personal effects now, your wallet, keys, phone, everything that identifies you to the outside world." He gestured to a small, gray plastic bin. "You won't be needing them here." I felt a surge of panic as I placed my phone, my last link to the life I knew, into the bin. It felt like a burial. For the next 6 months, Mr. Evans said with a practiced, serene smile, "The only identity we're concerned with is the one you haven't met yet." My therapist's name was Dr. Whitman. She wasn't what I expected. She was a woman in her late 50s, with kind, intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor that immediately put me on edge. Her office wasn't a sterile, white box. The walls were a soft, blush beige color. The sofa I sat on was a plush velvet, and the air was filled with the faint, calming scent of lavender. The whole environment felt feminine. It made my skin prickle with a discomfort that was strangely, terrifyingly pleasant. "So, John," she began, her voice soft but direct, "Harriet believes you're unhappy. Do you agree?" I shrugged. "My standard defense mechanism? I lost my job. It's a tough time." "Is that all it is?" she pressed gently. "The job?" The first few weeks were a painful, frustrating dance. I gave her the textbook answers. I talked about the pressure of being a provider, the sting of failure, the emasculation of relying on my wife's income. I built a fortress of acceptable, masculine problems around the trembling, secret core of my unhappiness. Dr. Whitman listened patiently, never pushing too hard, just asking quiet, probing questions that chipped away at my defenses. "Why do you always avoid conflict?" John, she asked one afternoon. I don't like to fight." "Or do you not like to be seen as a man who fails at fighting?" Another time, she asked, "You mentioned you felt alive when you were talking with Monica. What did that feel like?" I felt useful, seen. As a man giving advice, she probed. I hesitated. "No, just as a person." She wasn't judging me. She was just talking to me, from the heart. Then, one day, she finally aimed her scalpel at the heart of the matter. "Have you ever felt, John," she asked, her gaze unwavering, "that the role of man itself doesn't quite fit you?" The air left off my lungs. The question was so simple, so direct, yet it was the one question I had spent my entire life running from. It was the whisper in the back of my mind when I'd struggled to play sports as a boy, the discomfort I felt in locker rooms, the strange detachment I experienced while performing the rituals of masculinity. For the first time, someone had given voice to the nameless phantom that had haunted my soul. I couldn't speak. I just stared at her, my carefully constructed fortress crumbling to dust around me. The next session, she introduced me to what she called a gender expression exercise. It sounded clinical, safe. The reality was anything but. She led me to a room I hadn't seen before. It wasn't a therapy office. It was a large, beautifully appointed walk-in closet, filled with clothing, women's clothing. There were soft cashmere sweaters folded in neat piles, Midi skirts in jewel tones hanging in a row, silken blouses that shimmered under the soft lighting. There were delicate necklaces, elegant scarves, and a small collection of shoes flats, low heels, simple pumps. "The exercise is simple," Dr. Whitman said from the doorway. "Choose one item. Any item, hold it. Describe how it makes you feel. You don't have to try anything on, just connect with it." I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. This was a test, a trick. My mind screamed at me to turn around, to tell her this was insane. This was for other people, not for me. I was John Miller, a former executive, a husband. But my feet wouldn't move. My eyes scanned the room, and a primal, terrifying curiosity began to drown out the fear. My hand, moving as if with a will of its own, drifted past a wool skirt, hesitated over a cotton cardigan, and then stopped. It hovered over a simple sleeveless blouse made of deep emerald green silk. I reached out and touched it. The sensation was electric. The fabric was cool, impossibly smooth, and flowed over my calloused fingertips like water. It was a feeling so alien, so fundamentally different from the coarse wools and starch cottons of my entire life. The feeling wasn't sexual, it was something deeper, something resonant. It felt like a piece of a puzzle I never knew was missing had just clicked into place. My breath hitched. I lifted the blouse from its hanger. It was light as air. I held it in front of me, the silky fabric pooling in my hands, the emptiness inside me, that chronic gaping void. Suddenly felt a flicker of something new, a warmth. I looked up and caught my reflection in the full-length mirror at the end of the room. I saw a man in a gray polo shirt and khakis, looking lost and broken, but for a split second, as I held the green silk against my chest, another image shimmered into view, a person with softer shoulders, a longer neck than I'd ever noticed, a person whose features suddenly seemed to harmonize with the color and texture I was holding. The shame was still there, a hot wave of it washing over me, but beneath it was a new fragile feeling. It was a terrifying, exhilarating sense of recognition. "Why?" I whispered to my reflection, my voice hoarse. "Why do I feel like I've just come home?" That first touch of silk was the beginning of the great unraveling. Dr. Whitman never forced me, but the door to that room remained open. My therapy sessions became a mix of talking and these strange, silent explorations each day. I went a little further. First, it was just holding things, the surprising weight of a string of faux pearls, the buttery softness of a leather clutch. Then one day, with my heart pounding so hard I could hear the blood in my ears, I slipped the green silk blouse on over my t-shirt. It was too small, of course, tight across my shoulders, but the sensation of the silk against my skin, even through another layer of cotton, sent a shiver through me. It felt right, deeply, frighteningly right. The Institute's program was holistic. It wasn't just about clothing. There were voice coaching sessions with a kind therapist named Sarah. She taught me about breath control, about speaking from my chest instead of my diaphragm. "We're not trying to create a fake voice," she explained. "We're just exploring the full range of your natural instrument." As I practiced, my voice, which had always been a low, slightly gruff monotone, began to soften, to find a higher, more melodic register I never knew I possessed. There were posture and movement classes. We were taught how to walk with a more centered gravity, how to sit without taking up so much space, how to use our hands to gesture with grace instead of force. At first, I felt ridiculous, like a clumsy bear trying to pirouette, but slowly, my body began to respond. I noticed how my shoulders, perpetually hunched with the weight of failed masculinity, began to relax and slope. My stride shortened, becoming less of a march and more of a glide. Each small change felt like peeling back a layer of thick, uncomfortable armor I'd worn my whole life. The shame was a constant companion, a hot blush that crept up my neck every time I caught my reflection doing a posture exercise or heard my own voice sounding softer. It was the voice of my father, of every coach, of every bully, telling me to man up. But for the first time, there was another feeling fighting back a profound, overwhelming sense of relief. The constant, exhausting effort of being John was finally starting to lift. My wardrobe experiments became bolder. I moved from blouses to cardigans, then to skirts. The first time I put on a simple, A-line wool skirt, I almost collapsed. The feeling of air on my legs was so shocking, so liberating. I felt vulnerable, exposed, but also incredibly free. I learned the subtle language of fabric, how a jersey knit clung softly, how a pleated crepe swayed with every step, how satin whispered against my skin. I tried on a pair of black satin panties, the fabric sleek and light compared to the bulky cotton of my boxers. The sensation was so intensely personal, a secret comfort against my skin, that it made me want to cry. One afternoon, about 3 months into the program, Dr. Whitman suggested I try a complete outfit just to see how it feels. She said gently, head to toe. I spent an hour in that closet, my hands trembling. I chose carefully, assembling an identity piece by piece, a pair of sheer nude pantyhose that felt like a second skin, a simple pale blue midi dress with a V-neck and a flowing skirt, a pair of low, comfortable block heels that gave me an unfamiliar, elegant lift. When I was dressed, I didn't look in the mirror right away. I just stood there, feeling the dress settle around my knees, the slight, secure pressure of the heels on the floor, the soft drape of the fabric over my chest. I closed my eyes and breathed in. I felt calm. For the first time in my adult life, the dissonant noise in my soul went quiet. There was no struggle, no performance. There was just me. Finally, I opened my eyes and looked at my reflection. And for the first time, I didn't see a man in a dress. The person staring back at me was a stranger, and yet, I knew her instantly. She was tall and a bit awkward. Her shoulders were still a little broad, her jawline a little strong, but her eyes were soft, filled with a deep, sorrowful wisdom. The pale blue of the dress complemented her skin, and the V-neck elongated her neck in a way I'd never noticed before. She wasn't beautiful in a conventional sense, but she was real. She was whole. The fortress I had built over 45 years didn't just crumble, it evaporated. A sob tore its way out of my chest, a raw, primal sound of grief and release. Grief for the man I had tried so hard to be, an overwhelming, gut-wrenching relief for the woman I had finally allowed myself to see. Tears streamed down my face, not of sadness, but of a homecoming so profound it shattered me. I looked at my reflection through the blur of tears, at this person who had been waiting patiently inside me my whole life. The name John felt like a lie. A costume I had finally shed on the floor. A new name surfaced in my mind, quiet but clear, as if it had always been there. I'm not John, I whispered to the woman in the mirror, my new voice wavering. I'm Clarice. Dr. Whitman had entered the room so silently I hadn't noticed. She stood a respectful distance away, her expression one of profound compassion. Hello, Clarice, she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. Welcome. And as Clarice, for the very first time, I felt like I could finally breathe. The weeks after I found my name were a blur of consolidation. Clarice was no longer an experiment. She was me. Getting dressed in the morning in a simple blouse and skirt felt more natural than anything I'd ever worn before. Hearing my softer voice in conversation felt like my own. I was terrified, but it was the terror of a newborn taking its first breath, not the terror of a man falling apart. But one name, one person, loomed over my newfound peace, Harriet. The program was nearing its end, and the thought of facing her, of explaining this monumental life-altering shift, was a cold knot of dread in my stomach. What would the sharp, pragmatic lawyer make of Clarice? Dr. Whitman encouraged me to make the call. She deserves to hear it from you, from Clarice. Sitting in Dr. Whitman's office, I held the receiver of the landline phone, my palms sweating so much it felt like it might slip off. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I dialed the number I knew better than my own. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. Harriet Miller. My own voice was a trembling whisper. Harriet, it's me. There was a pause. She knew. Of course, my voice was different. John, you sound different. I am different. I managed, my throat tight. I know why I've been so unhappy, why our marriage has been so broken. I took a shaky breath. the words feeling huge and impossible. I'm the person you married, the man you thought I was. That wasn't the real me. I could hear the faint sound of her breathing on the other end of the line, steady and measured. My name is Clarice, I said, the words tumbling out in a rush of fear and conviction. I'm a woman, Harriet. I'm a woman. Silence. It stretched for an eternity. I heard the ticking of the clock on Dr. Whitman's wall, the frantic beat of my own heart. I braced myself for the explosion, for the anger, the confusion, the accusations. I had pictured this moment 1,000 times, and in every version, it ended with the dial tone of a disconnected life. When she finally spoke, her voice wasn't angry. It was heavy, weighted with years of unspoken observations, of questions she must have had. It was the voice of a lawyer who had just seen the final piece of evidence that makes the entire case make sense. Clarice, she said, testing the name on her tongue. It sounded foreign and yet fitting in her mouth. She took a long, slow breath. Well, that explains a great deal. I started to cry. Silent tears of shock and relief. There was no shouting, no recrimination, just a weary acceptance that resonated with a deeper truth than I could have hoped for. You were never happy, she continued, thinking out loud now. You were never comfortable in your own skin. You were always trying so hard to be someone, to be the man you thought you were supposed to be. I'm so sorry, Harriet, I sobbed. Stop, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. Don't apologize for this, just let me think. A week later, Harriet came to visit. I was a wreck of anxiety all morning. What should I wear? Should I wear makeup? I settled on a simple navy blue sheath dress and a touch of mascara, my hands shaking so badly I almost poked myself in the eye. I didn't want to look like I was playing dress-up. I just wanted to look like me. When she walked into the Institute's visiting room, my breath caught in my throat. She looked as powerful and beautiful as ever in a tailored charcoal suit. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, her expression unreadable. I felt completely transparent, my soul laid bare for her inspection. I stood awkwardly, my hands clasped in front of me. Hi. She walked closer, circling me slowly, not like a predator, but like an art critic examining a sculpture. Her gaze was intense, missing nothing, the slight softness in my face, the way I held my shoulders, the simple dress, the low heels. She finally stopped in front of me and reached out, her fingers gently touching my cheek. Her touch was feather-light. You look, she started, her voice a low murmur. You look more peaceful. The constant tension in your jaw, it's gone. I felt my face flush, a hot, girlish blush that was entirely new to me, being complimented by her, but in this way, as a woman observing another woman, sent a strange, pleasant jolt through me. We sat and talked for hours. I told her everything, about the clothes, the voice, the shame, and the incredible, soul-deep relief of finally letting go. She listened, her lawyer's mind absorbing every detail, connecting it to years of my unexplained moods, my distance, my anxieties. Finally, she leaned forward, her expression serious. This changes everything, you know that. I nodded, my heart sinking. I know. The life we built, husband and wife, that's over. John and Harriet are finished. She paused, and my world hung in the balance. But, she continued, her eyes locking with mine, I'm not sure I want Harriet and Clarice to be over before they even have a chance to begin. My head snapped up. If we were to continue, she said slowly, laying out the terms of a new contract, it would have to be something completely different, not a traditional marriage. 2 partners, 2 women, figuring it out together. No more lies, no more pretending. She took my hand, her grip firm and warm. Would you be willing to try that, to build something new, from the ground up? Tears welled in my eyes again, but this time they were tears of pure, unadulterated hope. I nodded, unable to speak, and squeezed her hand. It felt like a pardon. It felt like a second chance, not just at our relationship, but at life itself. A life where I didn't have to hide. A life as Clarice. Returning home was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. The house was exactly the same, yet everything felt different because I was different. Walking through the front door in a skirt and blouse felt both defiant and deeply natural. My old wardrobe, full of dark suits and stiff shirts, loomed in the master closet like a mausoleum for a man who had died. Harriet, ever the pragmatist, had a plan. "You need a job," she stated one evening, a few days after my return. "You need structure, and frankly, you need a new wardrobe that isn't from a therapy center." My heart sank. The prospect of job hunting as Clarice, a woman with a 45-year employment gap and a male name on her resume, was terrifying. "I have an opening for a personal assistant," she continued. Before I could spiral, "It's not glamorous. It's scheduling, filing, research, coordinating my travel. But the pay is decent, and you'd be working with me. It would give you a chance to acclimate." It was a lifeline. It was a safe, structured way for me to step into the world as Clarice. Under her protection, I accepted immediately, my heart swelling with gratitude. Our lives fell into a new strange rhythm. The roles were, in a way, more traditional than ever, but with a dizzying twist. I was now managing the home and her professional life, but as her female assistant, not her failed provider husband. The first order of business was clothes. Harriet took me shopping. It was a humbling, exhilarating, and occasionally mortifying experience. She was a ruthless critic. "No, that color washes you out," she'd say, dismissing a beige sweater I liked. "Your skin has cool undertones. You need blues, greens, deep reds." In a boutique, she held up a sleek pencil skirt. "You have good legs. You should show them. Posture, Clarice." I would stand in front of the three-way mirror, feeling clumsy and oversized, but Harriet's sharp guidance slowly began to build a new me. We found elegant wrap dresses that flattered my frame, silk blouses that softened my shoulders, and tailored trousers that looked professional and feminine. We spent an entire afternoon finding the right shoes simple, 1-inch block heels that I could walk in all day without breaking an ankle. "Confidence starts from the ground up," she declared, watching me teeter in the shoe department. Learning to be Clarice in the world was a daily lesson. I practiced a simple makeup routine: foundation, mascara, a neutral lipstick until I could do it without looking like a clown. I learned the particular kind of confidence it took to walk across a parking lot in a skirt on a windy day. I learned the subtle, constant awareness of my body that came with wearing more fitted clothing, the way a skirt brushed against my calves, the gentle pressure of a bra strap. My introduction at the law firm was masterfully handled by Harriet. "This is Clarice, my new executive assistant," she announced to her team, her tone leaving no room for questions. To my astonishment, people simply accepted it. I was a quiet, slightly shy woman who was incredibly efficient. They didn't know my history. They saw what was presented to them. I learned to smile politely, to answer the phone in my softer voice, to manage Harriet's chaotic schedule with meticulous care. I enjoyed the work, the feeling of being competent, of being useful to Harriet in a tangible way, was a balm to my soul. I liked being treated as one of the women. The other female assistants would include me in their coffee break chatter, complaining about their boyfriends or celebrating a sale they found online. It was a world I had only ever observed from the outside, and being welcomed into it felt like a quiet miracle. There were moments of awkwardness. A male lawyer holding a door open for me, calling me ma'am. Using the women's restroom for the first time was a nerve-wracking ordeal that left my heart pounding, but after a few times, it became normal. Harriet and I were careful with each other, navigating the new terrain of our relationship. We slept in the same bed, but there was a palpable space between us, a boundary of uncertainty. The old dynamic of husband and wife was gone, and the new one of Harriet and Clarice hadn't been fully defined. Sometimes, she would offer small, casual compliments that would make my heart flutter. "That blue dress really brings out your eyes," she said one morning as I was pouring her coffee. I felt myself blush to the roots of my hair, the feeling both thrilling and confusing. She was my boss, my mentor in womanhood, and the woman I was still legally married to. We were two people in a house full of memories, trying to build a future on the ruins of a past built on a lie. It was fragile and strange, but for the first time in our relationship, it felt completely, terrifyingly real. The firm's annual fundraising gala was a major event on Harriet's calendar, and therefore, on mine, it was also, I knew, my first major test in public as Clarice, an evening of small talk with strangers, of navigating a crowded room in heels, of being entirely on display. The anxiety was a living thing inside me, a frantic bird beating its wings against my ribs. "You need a proper gown," Harriet announced 2 weeks before the event. The shopping trip was different this time. We went to a high-end department store. Harriet led me to the evening wear section, a glittering forest of sequins and silk. I felt hopelessly out of place. "I can't wear any of this," I whispered, overwhelmed. "Nonsense," she said, pulling a dress from the rack. It was a deep forest green, the same color as the first silk blouse I had ever touched at the Institute. It was a floor-length gown with long sleeves and an elegant, modest boat neck made of a heavy, liquid-like satin that shimmered under the store lights. In the dressing room, the dress slid over my skin like cool water. It fit perfectly, skimming my body without clinging, the heavy fabric swaying beautifully around my ankles. When I stepped out to show Harriet, she was momentarily silent. "Turn around," she commanded softly. I did a slow, hesitant turn. "Well," she said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. "It seems we've found the one." The night of the gala, Harriet helped me get ready. It was a moment of unexpected, profound intimacy. She stood behind me as I sat at my vanity, showing me how to put my hair up in a simple, elegant chignon. Her fingers were deft and gentle as they brushed against the nape of my neck. I shivered, not from cold, but from the electric shock of her touch. It was a gesture devoid of the old, clumsy affection of our past life. It was something new, something purely feminine and caring. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice a low murmur near my ear. Yet I stammered, my eyes meeting hers in the mirror. For a fleeting second, the space between us was charged with an unspoken emotion, a fragile tenderness that made my breath catch. At the gala, I stuck to Harriet's side like a shadow, my clutch held in front of me like a shield. I was terrified, certain that everyone could see the fraud I was, the man hiding beneath the satin gown. But no one gave me a second glance. I was simply Harriet Miller's elegant, quiet assistant. Later in the evening, while Harriet was engrossed in a conversation with a judge, a man approached me. He was one of Harriet's senior partners, a handsome, charming man named Lucas. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." "I'm Lucas," he said, his smile warm. "Clarice," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "Clarice," he repeated, testing the name. "That's a beautiful name." "You know," he said, leaning in slightly, his voice dropping, "you have very gentle eyes." My mind went completely blank. I was being flirted with. A man was looking at me, Clarice, and seeing an attractive woman. The sensation was so alien, so utterly shocking, that my entire body went rigid. I felt a hot, panicked blush creep up my chest and neck. I murmured something incoherent and practically fled to the powder room, my heart hammering. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, my hands gripping the marble counter. Who was that woman Lucas had seen the compliment, so simple and harmless, had short-circuited my brain? It was external validation of a kind I had never imagined, and it was both intoxicating and terrifying. From across the ballroom, I saw Harriet watching me when I returned. She had seen the interaction with Lucas, and there was a strange, unreadable expression on her face, part amusement, part something else, possessiveness. In the car on the way home, the silence was thick with unspoken words. "You seem to be quite the center of attention tonight," Harriet finally said, her eyes on the road. I don't know what to do when that happens," I confessed, my voice still shaky. "I'm not used to it." "I know," she said, and her voice was softer now. "Lucas is harmless, but you should know. You look lovely tonight. Clarice, truly." The compliment coming from her meant more than 1,000 from a stranger like Lucas. It landed differently. It wasn't a flirtation. It was a statement of fact from the person whose opinion mattered most. It made my heart ache with a warm, confusing mix of gratitude and a longing for a closeness we hadn't yet figured out how to have. That night, when we got into bed, the space between us felt a little smaller, the silence a little less uncertain. It was filled with the gentle glow of her words. "You look lovely, Clarice." The gala was a turning point. Being seen as a woman by a stranger, and then being acknowledged so warmly by Harriet, unlocked a new level of confidence in me. The ever-present fear of being discovered, of being seen as a fraud, began to recede. It was replaced by a quiet, burgeoning sense of self-acceptance. I looked in the mirror and I no longer saw John playing dress-up. I saw Clarice, a woman who was still learning, still a little awkward, but a woman nonetheless, made of bone and blood and quiet perseverance. This newfound confidence began to manifest in my choices. Harriet's guidance had been my scaffolding, giving me a safe, classic, and professional style to inhabit. But now, I started to feel the stirrings of my own personal taste. One Saturday, I went shopping by myself for the first time. The terror of my first forays into women's departments was gone. I moved through the racks with a sense of purpose, my fingers trailing over fabrics, my eyes drawn to colors and shapes that I, personally, found beautiful. I was no longer just looking for things that would help me pass. I was looking for things that would help me feel joy. I bought a flowing A-line skirt in a cheerful pastel floral print. It was something Harriet, with her serious, corporate aesthetic, would never choose. But when I tried it on, I felt light and happy. I bought a soft, oversized cashmere cardigan in a lovely lavender shade, perfect for curling up with a book. I bought a pair of comfortable but stylish flats, freeing myself from the low heels I wore to the office every day. Each item was a small declaration of independence. My side of the closet began to change. The palette of navy, gray, and black was now punctuated with soft pinks, gentle blues, and warm creams. The severe, professional silhouettes were softened by flowing skirts and cozy sweaters. My wardrobe was starting to reflect not just my gender, but my personality. I was discovering who Clarice was. She was quieter, softer, and more romantic than the severe, buttoned-down man she had replaced. This internal shift began to change the dynamic between Harriet and me. I was less her student, less her project, and more her partner. I started offering my own opinions, making my own decisions, both at home and at work. Our conversations deepened. We no longer just talked about the logistics of our lives. We talked about our feelings, our fears, our hopes for this strange, uncharted future we were building. I realized that in becoming Clarice, I had finally become the partner Harriet had always deserved. I was present, I was honest, I was emotionally available in a way John, with his walls and his secrets, could never have been. The emptiness that had defined him was gone, replaced by Clarice's growing sense of self. One evening, we were sitting on the sofa, a comfortable silence between us as we read. I was curled up in my new lavender cardigan, feeling perfectly content. I looked over at Harriet, engrossed in a legal brief, her face illuminated by her reading lamp. A wave of love for her washed over me, so powerful it took my breath away. It wasn't the distant, obligated love of John, but a vibrant, grateful, and profound love from Clarice. This brilliant, strong, and unexpectedly compassionate woman had not only tolerated my transformation, she had actively guided me through it. She had given me the safety to fall apart so I could put myself back together as the right person. She must have felt my gaze, because she looked up, a questioning smile on her lips. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "For what?" "For seeing me," I whispered, before I could even see myself. She put her brief down and moved closer, taking my hand. Her touch was warm and sure. "I'm just glad," she said, her voice soft, "that you're finally home." In that moment, I knew I wasn't a man in a woman's body or a woman who used to be a man. I was simply Clarice, whole and complete, and I was home. Life settled into a rhythm that was both new and deeply comfortable. Harriet and Clarice. It was no longer a question or an experiment, it was our reality. The intimacy between us grew, not in a sudden rush, but in a slow, gentle tide. It was in the way she'd bring me a cup of tea without asking, the way I'd know to have a file ready for her before she even knew she needed it, the way our hands would sometimes brush as we passed in the hallway, lingering for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. One evening, about a year after I'd come home from the institute, we were having dinner. It was a simple Tuesday night, but the air felt charged with unspoken significance. Harriet seemed pensive. "Clarice," she began, setting down her fork. "Our marriage license says John and Harriet Miller. That document is a lie. It represents a life that no longer exists for either of us." My heart seized with a familiar fear. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," she continued, her eyes meeting mine across the table, her gaze clear and certain, "that I think we should get divorced." The word hit me like a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face. "But," she held up a hand, stopping my rising panic, "I'm also saying that I don't want to be without you. I want to be with you, Clarice. So I have a proposal. We dissolve the old contract, the one based on a falsehood, and then, if you'll have me, we make a new one." She got up from her chair, walked around the table, and knelt on one knee beside me. My mind reeled in shock. "Clarice," she said, taking my hand. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were shining with emotion. "I don't want to be your husband's widow. I want to be your wife. If you want this, if you want to start a new life, a true life, together, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down my cheeks as I stared at this incredible woman. The journey from John to Clarice hadn't destroyed our marriage. It had burned it down to its foundation so that something truer and more beautiful could be built in its place. It had liberated us from the roles we thought we had to play and allowed us to find each other, person to person, soul to soul. "Yes," I sobbed, laughing through the tears. "Yes, of course. I'll marry you." We held our ceremony in the garden of our home. It was a small, quiet affair, with only a few close friends and Dr. Whitman in attendance. I didn't wear a traditional wedding gown, but a simple, elegant ivory dress that fell to my ankles, the soft crepe fabric feeling like a gentle embrace. Harriet wore a stunning cream-colored pantsuit, looking every bit the powerful, brilliant woman she was. We stood under an old oak tree and held hands. We didn't exchange traditional vows. We spoke our own truths. "I choose you, Clarice," Harriet said, her voice clear and strong. "I choose your courage, your kindness, your grace. I choose the woman you are and the woman you are becoming. I choose this life with you." When it was my turn, I looked into the eyes of the woman who had saved me. "I choose you, Harriet," I said, my voice filled with a love that felt boundless. "You gave me the safety to find myself, and in doing so, I found my way back to you. I choose your strength, your wisdom, and your heart. And finally, standing here with you, I also choose myself." The journey from John Miller, the hollow man in the ill-fitting suit, to Clarice, the woman in the ivory dress, had been long and terrifying. It had cost me my old identity, my old life, everything I thought I was. But standing there, holding my wife's hand, I knew it hadn't been a journey of loss. It had been a journey of discovery. I had found my true identity. Harriet had found a partner who could meet her in truth and honesty, and together, we were finally beginning a life that wasn't defined by society's rules or expectations, but by the simple, profound truth of our own hearts.